Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The defense community is watching a wave of new technologies arrive at a remarkable pace. The conversation has increasingly shifted from what to buy to how quickly new capabilities can become useful in the field. Those issues will be front and center at the Professional Services Council Defense Conference this fall. Here with the preview is PSC Executive Director Jim Carroll. Jim, it's great to have you. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Terry, for having me on.
Always a lot to talk about in the contracting space. Let's talk first about counter-drone operations. DHS recently awarded roughly a $1.5 billion set of contracts. What are you hearing now, not so much about drones, but counter-drones and how the government is moving forward in this space?
Wow, Terry, what a great question. It doesn't seem that many years ago, really it was just a few years ago, that the government was talking about drones and how do we deploy them, how do we use them, what type of technology can you put on drones. That conversation has turned really 180 degrees. And how do we stop drones? There's a threat of drones. And that's really what they're going after now. Terry, as you and all of your listeners know, drones are being used right now in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and the reality of what drones can deliver can be very much a lethal concern. And so the counter-drone technology is really what they're looking to spend this $1.5 billion on, is the threat that we're seeing in real time over in Europe.
Jim, when you see an investment of this size, again, $1.5 billion, what does it mean for the contractors who've been innovating in this space? And what does it do for the market more broadly? Does it draw in new players?
Of course, $1.5 billion is enough money for, I think, any company that is looking at this space to invest more R&D into this. And the capabilities, some of which I've already seen, as simple as being on an app, what is essentially an app, looking at your phone and being able to look at a drone, including really a handheld small drone, pop up 100 miles away, is remarkable. And so it's detection, it's tracking, and it's the mitigation of these threats that really have these companies diving deep into how they can provide services for the country. Terry, we saw this during the World Cup games. Many of our member companies got large contracts to secure the skies over the games, over the parking lots. And thankfully, all of those games went down without incident. And so this technology is real, it works, and companies and the government are moving forward on this.
Jim, let me use this counter-drone technology kind of as a bridge of a broader challenge, because across the defense and intelligence community, we're seeing a bigger disconnect between the speed of innovation and the speed of acquisition or production. In fact, just last week, the Deputy Secretary of Defense issued a memo asking the defense industry to move faster in production. So when you think about this tension between innovation and production capacity, where are you seeing the opportunities for change?
Well, I'm really heartened by what Deputy Secretary Feinberg said the first time I met with him shortly after he became the DepSec at the Department of War. He was talking about how the government needs to do a really better job of awarding contracts faster and really expecting quick results for the price. And so what that meant at the beginning and at the time was they really understand that there is a need for the government to be able to receive information about the latest technology as quickly as possible. And in our meetings with the entire Department of War and with DHS, just to be fair, is how are they getting the latest information about what is available? I really think the Department of War is trying desperately to take advantage of the new technology. But one of the things that the companies need is certainty. And so they're more than happy, and they are responding to the command from both the president and the secretary and the deputy secretary to ramp up production. They're Most of these places that are making and manufacturing weapons have added shifts, they're adding facilities, but they need the contracts to do it. They can't just rely on a handshake. Their stockholders, their board of directors want the certainty of a contract. And so in order to do that, the Department of War needs to step up and award these contracts as fast as possible. And so it's a very much a symbiotic relationship. We hope that the contractors and the folks inside the Pentagon heard the message as much as we did on the outside.
Jim Carroll is CEO of the Professional Services Council. Well, Jim, this whole tension around production and innovation and speed is a topic of your conference coming up, Operationalizing Acquisition for the Warfighter. Tell us what that phrase means to you in practical terms, really, and why do you think it captures this moment?
Yeah, our defense conference will take place on October the 30th. So shocking. It seems like this is summer, but October 30th will be here soon, and we're having it right in Crystal City. A lot of government speakers and industry coming together to be able to actually give the technology, the services, the critical information to the warfighter. Terry, maybe you're more optimistic than I am about the end to conflict in Iran and what's happening there. Sadly, I don't see this ending quickly. And so operational needs of the warfighter will be there even if this ends by October 30th or ongoing. It's making sure that we're getting back to a steady state of being prepared, being able, and the ability to deploy quickly. We talk so much about the warfighters being on the tip of the spear. The contractors are also at the tip of the spear, maybe, not directly out in the field, but at least providing the information, analyzing the information, collecting the information so that the actual warfighter can produce and use this actionable intel. And so that's why this conference is important. This is why we've had such great turnout by the government individuals coming to this. And we know that this is mission critical.
Jim, in light of the defense memo that we mentioned earlier, as you get these industry leaders together and they're thinking about the rest of 26 and into 2027, what issues are generating the most attention and concern for them right now?
Will the contract award from the Department of War keep up with the demand from the leadership? That's really the most that they're talking about now. One of the issues also is the ability for contractors out in the field downstream to access and repair needs of the warfighter. And, it's called right to repair. There's a lot of legislation, right now happening up on the Hill. And we're deeply involved in those conversations, both on the Hill and with the industry, is first and foremost making sure that the warfighter has what they need, but then also obviously protecting the intellectual property of the companies that spent, in many cases, hundreds of millions, if not billions, to be able to produce it. And so making sure that contracts allow for the use and repair of technology downstream in a way that is actually safe and produces the results. So that's also going to be a big topic of discussion as well.
It seems like in our current environment, there's a lot of one-way communication from the Pentagon to contractors telling the industry what the Pentagon wants. As you convene this conference, what do you want the Pentagon leaders to hear back from industry about how to make their vision of faster acquisition and production a reality?
Well, maybe because the statements from the government seem to capture the headlines, and the work of what we're doing at Professional Services Council isn't quite as much newsworthy, but it is thankfully a two-way street. It's certainly the one-way information from the Pentagon going public, either by Deputy Secretary Feinberg, Secretary Hegseth, or the President. Our reaction is working with them sometimes prior to the announcement, certainly during it and after, to make sure that we can achieve their mission. And so the only little correction I think I could ever say, Terry, about that is that we are engaging on certainly a daily, sometimes it seems like hourly basis, to make sure that everyone understands how do we meet that challenge. That is going to be part of the conversations and sidebar, with all of the government speakers and government attendees at our defense conference. And so thankfully, it's a little bit of a two-way street, even if it's not quite as newsworthy or we don't issue a press release when we're talking to the Pentagon folks.
Jim Carroll is the CEO of the Professional Services Council. Jim, I always appreciate your insider view. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Terry. Have a great week.
You too. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.